Hello guys, welcome back, and today I'm going to be talking about Charlie Coyle getting traded for Ryan Donato. Now, big trade just happened between Boston and Minnesota, so what are the trade details and which team actually won this trade? Watch till the end to find out. Now, we're 5 days away until the NHL trade deadline, and this is a pretty big trade between the Minnesota Wild and the Boston Bruins. The Bruins sending a prospect and a pick back to the Minnesota Wild for a pretty solid player. Now, when it comes to the trade details, they go as follows. To the Boston Bruins is Charlie Coyle, and to the Minnesota Wild is Ryan Donato and a 2019 5th-round pick. And that isn't too complicated, pretty much a one-for-one trade minus that 5th-round pick, but it is a pretty solid hockey trade and one that both teams could definitely win from. Now, Charlie Coyle is a center at age 26. He has put up 28 points so far this season, and his contract ends after next season. So he still has a little bit of term with the Boston Bruins after this season, so he's not going to be a pure rental player for them, which is a pretty nice bonus. And for the Minnesota Wild, of course, you get Ryan Donato, who is a pretty solid prospect in my opinion, and could factor into the top 6 as soon as this year. Now, that 5th-round pick is likely not going to be too much unless Minnesota strikes gold, which will be very interesting. But Ryan Donato is the big piece going back to the Minnesota Wild, and he definitely is a big piece. With the NHL, with the Boston Bruins and the Providence, he's played pretty well, playing 18 games, getting 12 points. In the NHL, he played 34 games, getting 9 points. He's still a pretty raw prospect. He's a little bit older when it comes to these rookies, but he still has a lot of potential, and I still think he has definite top 6 potential. And in Minnesota, he could definitely realize that, and while Minnesota doesn't have the greatest teammates around him, Donato could still factor into their play as soon as right now. Now, the Bruins right now are on an absolute roll. They've won 6 straight games. They are 8-0-2 in their last 10 games. They're sitting up pretty right now, and I'm kind of surprised they actually went out and made a pretty decent move and a pretty big move at the trade deadline. This is, I always say, the trade deadline as well, but Charlie Coyle will definitely factor into their lineup quite well. In Minnesota, he doesn't really like to shoot too much. He's kind of disappointed over the last couple of years when it comes to overall points in his production, but in Boston, he maybe has some better teammates around him, has some better players, and he can also lead his own line in Boston, which is something he didn't really get to do in Minnesota. But having that ice time, I think, will be crucial for him if he's going to perform in Boston. And if Boston does give it to him, watch out, because he could be a pretty solid player for them. Now, we've seen Boston linked to some big guys like Mark Stone, some fantastic guys that are available for this trade deadline. Now, I'm not going to say that Charlie Coyle is one of those guys, no offense, but that is still a pretty decent ad for Boston to make. While he's not my favorite player in the world, he's not the best player in the world, he'll still get things done in Boston, and if he's used as a 3rd center, he can be very effective in that role for Boston and for a potential playoff run. Now, the thing here for me with Minnesota is that I've been a big fan of Ryan Donato for quite a while, especially in the last couple of years. Of course, he was with the 2018 USA Olympic team. He played pretty well, ended up going to the NHL that season, having a brilliant last few games and a brilliant playoffs, and I was a big fan of him. But this year has not been quite the same for him. He hasn't produced up to the rate that I imagined he could, and while he still has it in him, Minnesota will have to do a lot to develop him into the right kind of player that he can be. He showed that in Boston a year ago, and I feel like in Minnesota, he can realize the potential that he obviously has. Now, of course, this is the part of the video where I determine a winner of this trade, and it's a pretty hard one. I think this is an even trade that benefits both teams here. Charlie Coyle was a little bit snake-bitten in Minnesota, wasn't really getting anything going, and Ryan Donato is a player that didn't really fit in Boston this year and could have used a change of scenery, and Minnesota is that change of scenery for him. So I feel like this benefits both teams, but if I had to pick a winner, I would say the Boston Bruins, but just slightly. Now, I'm a pretty decent fan of what Charlie Coyle can bring, especially to a playoff contender, and Boston is definitely that. Charlie Coyle is a guy that can bring clutch goals, he can bring clutch play, and I feel like for the Boston Bruins, that is something that they'll need going into the playoffs. That Atlantic Division is pretty good right now, and that Eastern Conference is very scary, and if the Boston Bruins want to get out of it, and get out of the Eastern Conference maybe, a guy like Charlie Coyle coming on that team and changing the atmosphere a little bit will be very crucial for them, and I didn't have to give up too much. While I do like Ryan Donato, he is this year wasn't too promising for him, I would say, but Minnesota Wild still get a pretty decent prospect, and really, who knows what that 5th round pick might become. But let's say Ryan Donato becomes that top 6 player for Minnesota that I always envisioned him to be, then I would say Minnesota definitely does win this trade. With Charlie Coyle, I feel like he'll bring a lot to the Boston Bruins, and while they might not win the Stanley Cup this year, I feel like he'll definitely add a lot to a potential second round, first round, or third round playoff matchup that the Boston Bruins might be in. For me personally, I think this is a trade that benefits both teams. It makes sense for both teams involved. Charlie Coyle going to the Boston Bruins, a team that's kind of stockpiling right now, and the Minnesota Wild, while they're still in a playoff hunt per se, they're kind of in that outside looking in right now, and giving up a guy like Charlie Coyle to get some guy younger who has excellent potential is a good move for Minnesota and a solid move for Boston too. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about this trade between the Boston Bruins and the Minnesota Wild? Who do you think won? Do you think the Minnesota Wild won or the Boston Bruins? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video about Cam Talbot for Anthony Stolarz and my opinions on that trade. But that is going for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on this trade and which team won. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.